Games, board games. We might be talking about betting and bluffing, but we're not gonna shout. We continue working through the mechanics that we happen to read from BGG, although they originated from this book. You can get it and take a look, and we will discuss various things after I happen to stop singing. Hello, good morning,
Yeah.
good afternoon, whatever
Hi.
it is, wherever you are. 10 a.m. in UK time. Time
Okay.
for Betty Beats and Board Game Bladder. Episode, oh my gosh, 999.
999. Yay.
And I need to do a bit of preparation and send out all my guests bits of thing, and I'm going to set that up straight after this because it is
Okay.
going to be an epic show. It deserves to be set up in advance, and I am going to tomorrow, just as a quick preview, have Rita Model, Kirsten Lunda, Ryan Estrada,
Ah,
Glenn Ford, Jess Medring, Alan Paull, who's over there,
yeah.
Joe Kelly, Kenichuku Ogbuagu, Chris and Suzanne Zinsley, Tori Brown, Kathleen Mercury, Natalia Pazar, Kristen and Andy Looney, Ellie Dix, Anya Coombs, Eric Lang, Eric Royce, Amabel Holland, and Elizabeth Hargrave. And I'm really excited for that. And hello, CD, with whom I was playing a game on Board Game Arena just a few minutes ago. I hope you're generally well.
Uh-huh. Very good.
But for now, we are doing our regular fortnightly thing. And just to clarify, after episode 1000, we will not be doing this at least for a fortnight because we'll be at UK Games Expo.
That's true. I am noticing that my image keeps freezing, so maybe I ought to take my background off. What do you think?
Show people the reality
Yeah,
behind
I
you.
don't know. Reality, it's overrated, I reckon. Let's see. Let's
Ah.
see if that'll work better with no
But
background. There we
we
go.
are planning to
There we go.
continue, although
Yes, that's better.
I'm not making a definite promise, but possibly on the 14th, I might come back to weekly streaming. I don't know. Once a week seems a more, nicer schedule. Anyway, let's talk about recent highlights, living life and seeing the
Yay.
sights, recent highlights, playing games and other lights, recent highlights. So, what games have you been playing recently? Have you made
Well,
any bets recently?
I don't think I've made any bets.
I
No.
am not a
Which,
gambling person. I
yeah.
do not gamble.
No, I don't either. Oh well, what are we talking about betting for? We don't. No, well, never mind. No, what do I
Have you
play?
ever made a
Well,
bet in your life? I did
I
once go
have.
to the dog racing with a sibling, and I made bets, and it was like, okay, that's different, but it wasn't like something that I necessarily want to go for again.
Yeah, I
Salty
mean,
Horse says no gambling for me except in games.
oh yeah, games. Yes, I used to live in Cheltenham, and I did actually once go to Cheltenham races. I think it was. I think it might have been a company outing. I can't remember now. And I was sitting next to a guy who owned a supermarket, and so he was betting quite a lot, like 100 quid here and there. And I bet, like, I think in the whole day, I think I bet about 30 quid in 10 quid lumps, and I actually broke even on the day, so I was quite pleased with that. Didn't manage to lose all my money, which is nice.
Yeah,
But no, I've never been really attracted to gambling.
it is kind of a problematic thing in real life, and I think
Yeah.
it would be bad of us to not acknowledge that. Like in real life, it's can be highly addictive depending on your personality. And I think that if you're going to one of these places, make sure that you've decided, okay, this is how much
Yeah.
I'm going to spend.
Yeah.
This is how much I can afford, whether that's £10 or whatever value you think you can afford, and make sure that you're not going beyond your means.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Other highlights apart from the not gambling. Well, it was a significant two or three significant milestones in the last couple of days. The reason for the Kingmaker background was because Kingmaker is now officially in retail. So all the Kickstarter's been fulfilled. It's now officially in shops. At least in the UK, Further afield, I think there's a large shipment on the way to the United States, which won't get there until first week of June. So slightly delayed in the US, which is a bit unfortunate. But in the UK, definitely on sale. And from the Gibson's website and other shops, I'll be selling some. I'll be selling some at Essenspiel. I won't be selling. I won't be selling them on my stand at Expo, UK Games Expo, because I'll be next door to the Gibson stand, helping them with demoing and selling Kingmaker from their stand. So yeah, you can certainly buy one from me if you really want, and I may even sign them, possibly.
That sounds really exciting.
If people like signed copies, I am very happy to sign them. So that's one highlight. The other highlight was
Would you do a wee doodle? Would you do a wee doodle if someone said, "Hey, Alan, can you draw a little stick figure like a smiley face?"
I can draw a stick figure. That's about my limit of. Well, my ability of drawing.
I mean, I believe you did do some very nice prototype artwork for the games that's now known as Last Bug Standing in the Circle of Doom.
Oh right, yeah.
And like the kinds of animals, they definitely look like animals. Oh wait, was that not you? Was that from the internet?
I think that might have been from the internet, or it might have been from Charlie. Actually, I'm pretty sure it was Charlie, who's emulating the style of Bez. I think maybe. Anyway, so no, it wasn't me. I can't draw. I'm renowned for not being able to draw.
Would you write in a personalized tiebreaker?
Oh, I might do that. Yeah, that's not a bad plan. I could do that. So yeah, the other thing, yesterday was my birthday. Hurrah for me! I am now.
Happy birthday!
I am now officially.
Happy birthday, dear Alan! Happy birthday to you! Ooh!
But I am now officially a UK pensioner because now I am 66. That's an esoteric joke for people who are as old as me. So yes, I'm now a UK pensioner. And as Charlie says, I am now officially older than her. So there we go. Because I'm 3 months older than Charlie. So there's a period of 3 months when I'm one whole year earlier older.
And CD is getting into Earth. Are you playing that mainly physically, or are you playing that online? And there's a mad rush towards WellyCon, which is happening in 2 weeks, basically the same time as UK Games Expo. Indeed, it's the Southern Hemisphere's UK Games Expo.
That sounds
WellyCon,
great.
I've seen a lot of the photos. It's a fantastic time, and I hope that it works out brilliantly for you. Alex, thank you very much for the celebrations. Yes, we have finally gotten to the mechanisms that starts with B.
Yes, but the other thing, you asked about games. I've got a copy of this game, which is really esoteric. Inferno. It's not esoteric for wargamers. It's a game by, I'm going to point it to Enrique Ashelby and Volker. Now these guys, particularly Volker, are responsible for many of the Cohen series, counterinsurgency series. Again, this is actually where is it? Part of the Levy and Campaign series. This is volume 3 of that. So it's a series of games which are very simulation-y for war games. The reason it's called Inferno is because 1259-61. This is the period of Dante Alighieri, who wrote, obviously, Dante's Inferno, and there are references in there to this war over Tuscany between the Ghibellines, who were supporting the Holy Roman Emperor, and the Guelphs, who were supporting the Pope. I'm not sure if that's the correct pronunciation, but never mind. And it's one of those games where there's lots of logistics in it. So you don't just send an army and besiege somewhere. You have to make sure you've got enough carts, enough provisions, and enough coins in order to sustain your armies in the field. So it's very much a game for war gamers, hardcore war gamers like me. And so I've set that up and I started playing around with that, which is fun. I've managed in about a 2-hour playing session last night. I managed to start a couple of sieges as far as I've got.
So if someone wants a very in-depth game all about sieging the opponents and something that you can play in a solo mode, then you would recommend Inferno?
I would recommend Inferno by GMT Games. It's quite expensive, but it's worth it if you like that kind of game. It's definitely worth it. Yeah.
And before we crack on, from recent highlights, morning to Joe and Salty Horse says my first board game arena game Vidrasso was released in beta. Congratulations! And I'm probably just clicking around, to be honest, and trying to work out the mechanisms without reading the rules, which is my approach when I play a game for the first time on Board Game Arena.
Very appropriate. Yep.
But congratulations, and maybe we can chat about it sometime. Other stuff that I managed to do after I streamed yesterday, I finished writing all my terrible rules for a game about words that rhyme with terrible rules on a line. Actually, I feel like I should show this off.
Yes, you should. Yes. Let's see your terrible rules, please.
Well, there's multiple terrible rules.
Oh.
There's so if I'm going here, here we go. That's the cover, and an activity for children. Learn the words definitions. Look at a list of 5 rhymes, then ask your child to define a word and then say it out loud. Sometimes that's enough to be proud. And then something that's simpler, connect 2 topics with each other. The subjects are things that are good, like dancing and cuddles and food. Take 2 cards to inspect and try to connect the topics as best suits your mood. And then you've got, if you're a little bit older, here's yet another. Rhyming soup, good for a group. Take some cards, more than 2, but fewer than 12, you do you. Put them picture sides up, drink from a cup. Flip 1 to choose the topic to use to start your part. Flip the top card of the deck. Don't stop to inspect. Say a line so it's heard. End with one of the words. Then every player in some turn order says the next line to finish the rhyme. The words on the cards make it hopefully not hard. If they take too long, something's gone wrong. I'll say they lose and should stare at their shoes. Flip another card to view, and the poem will continue. And there's a few things there, and then there's also some poems. And then the main bulk of the game is just these topics, where you've got topics like sleeping until whenever, hot weather, live music, waddling ducks, or hugs and cuddles, and then each thing has 3 that are monosyllabic and 2 rhymes that are exactly 3 syllables. So it's got a slight juxtaposition.
Oil rig has 2.
Oil rig.
Oh, really? Okay. I think you're pushing it there. Yes, okay.
I mean, anyway, they are polysyllabic.
Yeah, okay. They're polysyllabic. That's fine.
Okay. Anyway. And Alex has
weird. There we go. Yes.
Recent highlights. Congratulations. And do good and food really rhyme? What do you mean? How do they not rhyme?
Everyone's a critic.
Yeah. But I do also say, if I can find the bit...
you just have to put the accent on it. Put a regional accent will make anything rhyme, almost.
Let me show this bit where I say, what is a poem? What is a rhyme? What is a stanza? What is a line?
What is a line?
That you want to share, maybe with some words to show that you care. Sometimes a rhyme is just only fun. Don't let perfection stop you getting it done.
Yeah. That's a get out rule, isn't it?
It is. Like, everyone
Absolutely.
can be imperfect. That's telling you that you can be imperfect. I think it's very important.
Oh, I have imperfect down to a T.
Oh, you're wished. I'm going to ignore you from now on. Anyway, yes, that was the highlight. I got myself to London. I was in Hereford before. I played a few levels of Questable solo, which I'm really excited about.
Good.
The new level that I invented, like, we wanted to have something where the numbers on the cards really matter, not just matching the fronts with the end, but now we've got a level where you've got to make 5-letter words or more, and every word has to total either less than 15 or more than 20. And that was a really nice level because it was, okay, I'm going to put some of the smaller numbers into this line and the bigger numbers into this line, but even so, I might need to go above 5 letters. So, yeah, anyway.
Oh, I should also mention, and I don't know why it slipped my mind. I was on the Dice Tower. I was interviewed.
Oh,
I was interviewed on
congratulations.
the Dice Tower on the at the table section with Eric Summerer and Tom Vassell. And we were it's largely to coincide with the launch of Kingmaker to retail, but we were talking about old games and old people. So that was fun.
And that'll be something that we talk about a wee bit tomorrow,
I'm
where we will
sure.
be a
Yes.
lot more to the point. I'm going to probably forego all these recent highlights, and Alan will just give like a quick 5-minute chat, and then
Yeah.
Alex says, "I was on a dice tower once, but it broke."
Yeah.
Let's crack on and talk about why is betting, at least in games, why is betting and bluffing a brilliant thing? Brilliant thing. It's a little thing which is brilliant. I think that betting is a really interesting thing because it's a way to communicate asymmetric knowledge.
Yes, it's one of those things which enhances player interaction, and is manipulable or directly manipulable by players, which is that's part of it. Betting and bluffing, of course, and the bluffing bit is I know a bit more than you, or do I? In which case I can bet more or less. Yes. So it's a brilliant thing because of those methods of player interaction.
And it is fairly simple to understand. It's basically saying, hey, this is going to happen. And if it actually pays off, you feel a sense of pride. It kind of mixes that sense of, yes, you've got agency, but there's still some excitement because not everything is within your control.
And there is a sense of triumph if you win the bet, of course. I mean, if you lose, it's bad. But if you win, there is that sense of triumph, and it does mean you can have games with successive betting or games just based on one big bet as well. So there's a lot of variety. But we're going to talk about that kind of thing.
And I think that is there anything else about betting that we really want to say right off the bat?
Well, we are only talking about betting in games, and we've already covered gambling otherwise.
And I think that this is another great thing about games, like similar with lying, similar with social deduction. I would hate it, frankly, if Alan, you started just randomly, being sarcastic. Sarcasm, sure, it's like something that a lot of people do, but for me, it can be kind of confusing. And if you're just lying for the sake of it, that's even worse.
Yes.
And then it's like, oh, I feel a bit disappointed. But I think the thing about doing it in a safe environment is then you know what to expect. And in betting, it's like, okay, this is something that we're able to explore. And we're able to explore this part of humanity that might be potentially problematic because of its addictive nature that we mentioned before.
Yes, it's a core part of games is that in games we can all play a role. So you can play an evil character in a game, and you can play it really evil, but it doesn't mean to say you're an evil person because you are playing that role. So you can play somebody who bets either well or badly in a game, and with a bit of as long as you're not using actual money, because of course if you're playing poker with real money, then betting in game. I don't think we're going to be discussing poker particularly, although obviously that is.
Well, we could.
We mention it in passing.
I think that it might be. I think that backgammon was frequently played for money.
Oh,
and
yes.
so were lots of other pub games. And I know that traditionally in Run, I think that if you win, then you get some amount of money. But then if you win without the other person even getting to the end bit, then you take double that amount of money. And if they don't even get there, then it's triple. But there's
a lot of gaming started. If you look back in the history, it started with gambling, like dice. One of the original bits of components, dice made out of bone, whatever. Casting the dice, casting the bones. It's all about well, it's about divination, and in a sense, divining things is part of what betting is. It's saying, will the gods support me? I'm going to bet that they will. I'll cast a dice, cast a bones. Yeah. So that's one thing. The other, one other little nuance that I realized when looking at import export, as I do as a publisher, if you're exporting playing cards or importing playing cards, because they can be used for gambling, they will carry customs duty usually. Whereas if it's a board game that doesn't involve playing cards, then they don't. So the authorities place a premium on playing cards because it's assumed that people will be using them for gambling.
And this is only traditional playing cards, right?
This is traditional playing cards, not I should stress.
And when we say traditional playing cards, we mean specifically the 4-suit 13 rank deck. So even by having Lost Cities, they might ignore that, or even in a tarot deck, they might not ignore that, even though you could use those things.
I mean, I suspect that even our game, I'm not sure if we've ever exported our game on the cards. On the cards has got a pack of playing cards and a pack of cards which define what trick-taking games are.
Yeah, it's like a precursor to 504, where you can generate a ridiculous number of games because you've subdivided what makes a trick-taking game.
But although that game was not, the whole purpose of that game was to play trick-taking games and not gambling, I suspect that it probably would have been, I don't know if we ever exported any, as I said, it might well have been subject to extra customs duties.
But it was on the line.
But it was on the line, yeah.
Just by the presence of another thing that says these cards are used for a specific purpose, that might excuse it or it might not. We'd have to double check.
Interesting, yeah.
But yes, the Ace card did used to have that tax stamp, that's a true thing. And going back to betting in games, but for real money, whilst I think that the inherent lust for gambling, the lust for wealth, does mean that at least dice were invented, so that can be a brilliant thing about that. But I think that in this day and age, I think it's sad that some people feel like they can only access that emotion if they're playing for real money.
Yes.
I remember playing poker. I've played poker a few times but I remember playing it with a particular group of friends on 2 occasions. One time, I was taking it quite seriously, but we might have all been in a slightly altered state of consciousness. There might have been some alcohol involved. And everyone was giggling, and then I was wondering what was going on until I realized that we were all sitting on the floor. Someone was occasionally dragging all my chips over with their foot and stealing them from behind me. And they were all giggling because they were waiting for me to realize, because they thought that hilarity was worth breaking the game for. It wasn't we'll skip past Bez and then say we won. It was, hey, let's see how long until Bez finds out, which is fine.
I have played poker with matchsticks, which is a traditional thing to do. Very very English thing to do, I think.
Or indeed, you can play it for pennies, where this is some currency, but you're not going to be out more than 50 pence at the end of the night. But we played it once with counters. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is we played it once for real money, where I said, I'm not sure I want to pay. And then my friend said, you know what, I'll pay for you to join in. You'll see that it actually feels different because, when there's this amount of money on the line. And I did sit down, and it was I did know that there was, because of the number of people, there was going to be, I think, £100 if we won. But it felt...
Does it still feel different if you're playing with somebody else's money?
Well, that's a question.
Do you take it more seriously if you're playing with somebody else's money rather than your own?
The main difference was that I knew everyone else was taking it seriously. For me, that was the only difference.
Oh, okay.
Because in the first instance, I think I was playing my best no matter what. if I wanted to fold repeatedly, because sometimes doing that a lot, even though it's the less exciting move, might make you win more often,
Yeah.
then maybe if you're playing with counters, you're like, oh, you know what, I'm just going to go all in and it's
Yes.
fine.
Mm.
But you maybe play a bit more cautiously, you try to actually maximize your expectation value. But I think for me, the difference there was simply that I knew everyone else was taking
Was
it
playing
seriously.
seriously.
And
Yes.
so it is a kind of slight contract. But then at the same time, if you play it with people of vastly different amounts of wealth, I could imagine, if I was playing with Bill Gates and then they were chucking in a tenner, I don't think that it would make any difference to how seriously they took it.
Good point.
But then maybe Bill Gates would be, what's the word I'm looking for, empathetic enough to understand that with some real money on the line, that this
Maybe.
is a serious game, or they might not. I don't know. I've never met Bill Gates in real life.
Interestingly, there was a weekend freeform game which was set in the Wild West, and that had a series of poker games as part of the game. So you were playing a role of somebody who was playing poker, and that was a fascinating thing, because there we did have disparities of wealth in game, and it wasn't because a lot of people not necessarily good at poker. They actually built into the characters certain special abilities that a character had in the poker game. So effectively, the normal rules of poker did not apply, and that's a really fascinating way of having that betting mechanic within a very different kind of setting, because what they're trying to do there is they're enhancing the dramatic feel of a high stakes poker game in a role-playing setting where some of the players who are supposed to be in-game the best poker players don't actually know how to play poker, or at least only know the basics. And that's really fascinating. I didn't actually, to be fair, I didn't actually play because I had other things to do in the game, but I did watch a couple of games, and it was a very interesting way of doing a poker game. Fascinating way of doing it.
That is interesting, like exploring. But I would like to ask everyone else: how do you feel about games where you're betting for real money, like poker and things like that? How do you feel about that? And Alex mentions something about imports. I don't know if this is true. Alex is pretty sure it's true. Someone wanted to import scientific glassware, but to get around customs charges, declared that he was instead importing air. Interesting.
That's quite possible. I can imagine.
Yeah, people do miscategorize everything.
Yes.
But yes, I think that this is a really deep topic. And similarly, when we get into dexterity, I'm sure we'll get into the accessibility and what all that means. But here, games can be problematic. Even games where you aren't using your real money, they can be addictive. Anything that is a form of escapism can go too far. And custom charges.
I like that one. Oh God! Oh, that is so true. That's really true. Oh dear. Oh yes. We've had that. We've had that with Kingmaker. People exporting to Canada apparently is quite. There are vagaries, because there'll be different charges in terms of shipping, handling charges, and customs charges, which don't seem to have any relation to each other. So somebody might get charged 12 Canadian dollars, another person might get charged 45 Canadian dollars, and there doesn't seem to be any reason why the differences should be there. There probably is somewhere in the Canadian customs documentation.
Sometimes it's just people spotting things or not spotting things.
Yeah, this is true.
But let's talk about what we're talking about. And we are talking about, as Alex mentioned, we have gone all the way down to the Bs.
We are on
betting and
Bs
bluffing.
at last.
And what's this all about?
Shall I read this out?
How is this defined?
Okay, I'll read it out from the book. Players commit a stake of currency or resources to purchase a chance of winning everyone's stake, based on some random outcome, like being dealt a superior set of cards or rolling a higher number. Players typically have partial information about the overall game state and may bluff, in quotes, by representing through their in-game actions that they hold a stronger position than they do. Conversely, players may, quotes, fold or quit the contest and limit their losses to whatever they have already staked. So that's
Mm-mm.
actually, I think,
That's
the
verbatim the
same.
same as what
Yes.
they had here. So they didn't make any edits for
No.
the
Yeah.
Board Game Geek ports over, and so we don't need to talk about
Yeah.
that anymore. I
It's
think
worth.
one thing we should say is that there's a lot of games listed here which
Yes.
are just about bluffing,
Yeah.
because we've
It's.
discussed this before the
Mm.
show. This is not betting or bluffing. This is betting and bluffing.
So and I don't, it's really hard to tell whether that means it includes games with just betting, or games with just bluffing, or both, or games with betting and bluffing. So, but
I
then
mean, I
again, I
think
suppose
the
in a sense, the whole concept of betting is that you are, to an extent, bluffing. Otherwise, is it really a bet? I'm betting because I'm betting against other people because I think that I've got more information than you, or better information than you, or I'm just luckier than you. So there is, I think, possibly automatically some form of bluffing within the concept of betting in the first place.
I mean, folding is an interesting one because folding is that initial evaluation of your hand, and if you have a weaker hand, then you fold. But then by folding, by having that game loop repeat several times, that means that if you fold when you're meant to, and then once in a
Yeah.
while you don't fold,
Yeah.
then that's a strong indication that you might have a stronger hand. If you were to never fold, then it doesn't mean anything that you're carrying on, because bets only mean something if the absence of a bet also means something. Does that make sense? Would you
Yeah, I
agree with
think.
that?
Yes, I would agree with that. You do need to have that concept of folding in a game which is more purely like poker, which is poker isn't necessarily about having a good hand, is it? I mean, I haven't played a lot of poker. It's about whether somebody else thinks you've got a good hand, not whether you actually have. So folding is an important part of that. I mean, I suspect that there may be times in the game of poker where you want to fold when you've got a full house, for example.
And Salty Horse says, how is it fun to pass all the time? I mean,
Well,
it's allowing you to access the mind games, I guess.
yeah.
Let's
Well, passing
actually.
all the time isn't going to work, is it? Because you're going to lose. You have to strike at some point. Yes. Anyway.
I would actually like to start off by talking about the first game on the list, which is
Yes.
Camel Up,
Camel Up.
which I would say that in Camel Up, you are able to, sorry to take the spotlight away from you, Alan,
No.
but
Hang
you
on.
are allowed to bet, obviously, on what's going to happen. But when you aren't betting, that's kind of like saying, okay, I don't have enough information yet. That is,
Yes.
in essence, almost like folding in poker. But then the interesting thing is that it gives you a, hey, when you don't know stuff yet, you get this other thing, which is kind of fun, where you get to toss out the dice and at least you get to
Yeah.
do something in a tactile way, which
Yes.
I guess you could argue that this is kind of an evolution where instead of just betting or not betting, it's betting or doing this other thing, which is an interesting evolution.
Yes, this is. I think it's quite sophisticated in terms of design. Because this game, but Camel Up, most people will probably know of Camel Up, but it has two types of betting. Firstly, that it has the betting on who wins the round, or the leg, rather they call it. And this game is about betting on camel racing. It's not really about camel racing. It's about betting on camel racing. You don't have your own camel. You're betting on which one will win a leg, or through a different mechanism, which camel will come first or which camel will come last. And that's the beauty. So
the red camel's best.
the red camel's best. What? The blue camel. Blue camel's best. I can see that you might think the red camel's best, but you have imperfect information best. Anyway, so the leg betting.
I mean, in all seriousness, here the green camel is clearly in the best position.
Clearly.
Because it's on top,
yes.
and
Well,
if there's a tie when camels move, and this is the interesting thing, they carry each other over.
Yes, bearing in mind, of course, that if the green camel has already rolled its dice, but the other camels haven't, the green camel is not necessarily in the best position. However, this is more mechanical. So the betting here is very structured, so people don't have to make a judgment about how much to pay, because all the betting is fixed. That sounds wrong, but you know what I mean. The values of the bets are fixed. So in the leg betting, you have cards. Sorry, you have tiles, a pile of tiles for each camel, and if you want to bet on who will win the leg, literally that's your action for your turn. You take the top tile, and that tile will have a value high to low. So I thought the top one's 5, I think, and the bottom one's 1, I think. Or it might be 2. I can't remember. Anyway, and that's the amount of money you will win if that camel does actually win the leg.
So there's an incentive to bet early, but there's also a stronger incentive to bet correctly.
Yes. Do you? I can't remember. Do you lose money in Camel Up in leg betting if you bet wrongly? I have a feeling that you do lose a 1. I think you lose 1 money. So the leg betting stakes aren't particularly high, and legs are, well, more predictable, I guess, than the whole race. But the mechanism the mechanism for the whole race, winning the whole race, or losing the whole race is a bit more sophisticated. So instead of doing the betting on the leg, or actually moving a camel, which is the other actions you can do, or placing a desert tile, which is an esoteric thing you can also do, which restricts camel movement, you can instead put one of your cards. You have one for each camel, or 2 for each camel. If you put one of your cards in a stack, face down in a stack, to indicate whether you think a horse is going to win the overall race or lose the overall race. And the earlier you bet on the outcome of the race, the more money you'll get. So at the end of the race, you turn that. There's a stack for bets of winners, and a stack for bets for losers. And at the end of the race, you turn those stack up so that the first person on that stack will get 8 money, and it goes down. So if you're the more risk you take, the greater your potential winnings if you're right.
And it's kind of like a game of chicken, of how early do you bet. I mean, you aren't actually manipulating the race. You are continuing the race. You're just ejecting a random color of dice with a random result by ejecting it from this pyramid, and then you move that thing.
Yes, you can have there is a small amount of manipulation you can do through the desert tile, which it's very small, though. It's quite small. So the whole point of this is
generally it's either betting or continuing the race. I think would be a better way to put it.
It's quite sophisticated, though, because then in design terms, then what becomes very important to make it it's a fair game. It's got a lot of luck in it, but to make it a fair game, you have to make those values that people will earn through winning their bets. They have to be balanced between the players. So hence, if the leg betting, having it a 5 if you win the leg rather than a 6 or a 7 or whatever, or a 4, I'm sure that's absolutely critical in terms of making it at least seem fair to players. And similarly, at the end game bets, if you bet correctly on the winning horse and your card, and you were the first person to bet on that winning horse, you get 8. I'm guessing that is absolutely critical as well in terms of the actual value to make it fair, and to get people to take those actions. You have to make those values accurate. But it does mean that
interesting about
players
kind
don't
of
have
having that incentive. You have to balance the incentive for people to do it early and make that uncertain. So that was really interesting design. I agree.
Yeah. And people
I would like
to
crack on and talk a wee bit about Magic the Gathering very briefly, which seems like an odd inclusion, because whilst there is absolutely bluffing integral to the game of, okay, I attack with these creatures, now I'm attacking with a small creature, you've got some medium creature, now you could block and kill my creature. Am I attacking because I've got an instance that can change the results of this combat, or am I bluffing? And that's interesting, but there is no real bet there. The closest that I'm aware of, because I don't know every single Magic the Gathering card in existence, and yes, maybe some cards are a bluffing mechanism. And hello, Timmy, it's lovely to see you there. This card, Goblin Game, is each I'll read the original text. Each player hides at least one object. Then all players reveal them simultaneously. Each player loses life equal to the number of objects he or she revealed. But the player who revealed the fewest objects then loses half his or her life rounded up. If 2 or more players are tied for fewest, each loses half his or her life rounded up. And yeah, is this actually a bet? Because I'm kind of betting on how little I think you will do. So it's kind of a bet,
Yes,
because
kind.
I'm
It
trying
is.
to predict how life you are willing to lose, and then try to go marginally more, because I definitely don't want to be the fewest.
I think it is a type of bet. It's a very negative type of bet, but it is a bet, I think. Also, it's very expensive. It costs 7 mana. Which is reasonable.
Yeah, it's not a great game. I mean, great card, sorry.
No, it's fine.
It's a fine game.
Yes, it's fine. It's an absolutely fine game, but not a great card, possibly. Yes.
Yeah, and somehow it's got a community rating of 80 votes of 4.269, which people normally do, which maybe that's more to do with how much people found it amusing rather than
yes, quite possibly.
But yeah, I just want to make a note that with a game that's got so many thousands of cards like this, it feels kind of meaningless.
There's almost certainly going to be some cards in Magic the Gathering that involve betting and bluffing. Yeah.
I don't think it's a good card. I think that I would not use this in many decks where I was trying to win, but I could imagine it being lots of fun to bring out. And in Commander, where you are getting ridiculous amounts of mana, like depending on the format you played. Magic the Gathering. If someone who hasn't heard of it, I would be.
I can't imagine people wanting to play a game like that. It sounds terribly expensive and time-consuming.
But
anyway,
let's crack on. And I was going to talk briefly about Wits and Wagers, which is another interesting thing, where you are betting essentially on other people's knowledge. So first, you've got a question in Wits and Wagers for those people who don't know it, designed, I believe, by Dominic Krabashets of previously North Star Games. But you might have a question like, how many steps are in the Empire State Building?
It's not something I know. No,
not something that anyone probably knows. But someone will have counted it. That information will be available somewhere. It does have a definite number. At least 5, says Timmy. Yeah, so you're trying to get the highest without going over. You're trying to write the closest without going over, if that makes sense. And yes, it is a great game. And that's where the wits come in. Then the second part is the wagers. And for the wagers, you are then putting your betting tokens on who you think was the closest without going over.
Not your own, necessarily.
It could be your own
if you think that you are the best. Yes.
But you could say, well, I was just guessing. Well, I'm going to clearly guess on that person because they've actually been to the Empire State Building. They might have a better idea than me. And at this point, you're betting on, just who you think is correct. You can put extra chips down if you want to increase the price of your bet. And there's also a nice thing where earlier on, you bet with just your chips and they keep coming back. So you're never totally out of money.
Right.
So that's quite a nice little thing.
Yes.
And what I thought was noteworthy in this game is that, sure, the ultimate answer is given afterwards, and that's been written by the designers, but all the possibilities that you can bet on are player generated. And I think that is really interesting.
Yes, it is. Yes, that's very, very true. I mean, and this is a game where I suspect you want to project a particular stance. Are you going to be very poker-like and po-faced in this game? Probably not. I think, as Alex said, sometimes you want that situation. I write down this answer. Or conversely, I actually know the answer, but I'm going to look like I don't know the answer. So all those kinds of little psychological games are going to be very rife in that game.
Because if I know that the number of minutes in on a CD is about 72 minutes. It might be, I'm not sure, but if I'm fairly confident that it is that number, then I want to be, oh, I don't know, I'm just guessing. And
Yeah, yeah.
maybe because I'm betting, I want to distract other people from betting correctly.
Yes.
And I think it's this which really gets into the heart of why betting and bluffing are connected. Because as soon
Yes.
as you bet on something, you are giving other people information.
Exactly. Yes.
Mm-mm.
I mean, and this is obviously this is a modern game with betting in it, isn't it? I mean, it's not. This
Yes,
is not an old game. I mean,
relatively
they are
modern.
fairly
I
modern.
mean, compared to it's compared to your next pick, yes.
Yes, because I was going to contrast it with an old game. Totopoly is an old game, and I've got a kind of old player theme today. It's a Waddington's game. Came out in 1938, and it's about horse racing. Well, it's about betting on horse racing. It was one of the games that actually got me into game design because
Oh wow.
I mean, it seemed to me to be very innovative for its time. Anyway, I mean, I didn't see it in 1938. I'm not that old, but anyway, it's a two-part game. So the first part of the game is where you actually buy your horses and you go around this first part of the board. And it's a kind of business. It's a business affair. You go around the first part of the board, training your horses, and you may control like the forage merchant or somebody else. Oh, there's an auctioneer because at the start of the game you auction some of the cards. So you might have the forage merchant, you might have the auctioneer. That can get you income during the first half of the game, which you can then use for betting in the second half. So the thing here is you then flip the board over, and on the other side of the board you've got this racetrack. So having bought your horses and trained your horses through the first half of the game, you then race them in the second half. Oh, you might have the vet. The vet's quite a good one to have as a business because there are instructions on the first half of the game which says you have to go to the vet because your horse is lame or something, and in which case the vet gets income. And the second part is the race. Now, the thing about the race is that before the race starts, you are allowed to bet on any horse to win the race. And
Not just your own.
Not just your own, no. And you can bet as much as you like, as much money as you've got on this if you want. Now, part of the secret of the game, in a sense, is that there are three types of horse. There's the black ones, the red ones, and the light blue ones. The heavier horses are the black ones, and then the mediums are red, and the other ones it's blue and yellow. Sorry, blue and yellow. So I think you have heavy horses, which are the black and red, and the lighter horses, which are blue and yellow. And the heavier horses tend to be slightly more likely to win, slightly faster. But during that first half of the game, you're gaining advantage or disadvantage cards, which you can then use to influence the race. And those are open, so everybody can see what you've got. So in a lot of ways, there's not a huge amount of bluffing in here, but if you know the game better than somebody else, you've got more chance of judging, I suppose, how the game might play out, bearing in mind what cards people have got. And the betting isn't secret either, so you know how much people have bet, and of course, the order of betting can become a little bit significant there. Now, you win. Now, in the very original version of the game, very oddly, the 1938 edition, when it first came out, you won the game simply by owning the horse that won the game, which made no sense because there's no point in the betting if all that happens is you win by having the horse that wins. So they quickly changed that to the person who has the most money at the end of the game wins. Now you can see here, so it matters where you go. There's an inside track which is slightly faster, and there's these coloured advantage squares or strips. So if I have a black advantage card, if I land on somewhere, I can change the color of that color to the black color, in which case I go quicker. If I have white disadvantage cards, I can't finish the race with a white disadvantage card. I have to get rid of it by playing it on my own color when the horse lands on it, which cancels the advantage. So there is information in there, and you are all separately assessing that information when you make your bets. And then at the end of the game, the amount of money there's a prize pool, which is how much people have bet, and you win the amount of money proportional to how much you bet on the winning horse, which is a bit mathematical but fairly straightforward. So there is actually a tote master or something who gets 10% of the pot, just because they do the maths, which is interesting. Also, it's not completely on the betting, although it often can be. But there's also a prize money package. There's a bunch of prize money, which is all drawn from 25 quid that owners have to pay to enter the race, and all the money that is gained from auctioning the car at the start. So if you're the owner of the winning horse, you get half that prize pool. If you're second or third, you get a quarter of it. So you don't win just by winning the race or betting well. There's also a bit of side money on having the, owning the horse that won will give you a bit of an advantage. Now it's not as well developed as Camel Up, because you can get these little corner cases which people think of as design flaws. So, for example, if I bet like 10 quid on an outsider, and I'm the only person who bet on that horse, and it wins, then I get all the prize money, which does feel a little bit like I just got a lucky bet and won the game through a lucky bet, and the rest of the game becomes rather irrelevant. Some people think of that as a design flaw. I'm not sure I do necessarily, because you have to guard against that.
It gives you the potential for a big moment.
Yes,
and it depends on what you're trying to facilitate.
Yeah,
and also it seems to me that there's a bunch of different skills in general when it comes to betting. Like, there's the estimation and analysis of numbers, of probabilities, and also there's the reading of others.
Yes.
But then finally, there is the aspect of, okay, what do I do when I'm in first, when I'm already winning, versus when I'm losing? Like, if I'm losing and I need that outside chance, I am going to bet on the
outsider. Exactly.
Yeah, because that's my only way to come back. And if I'm doing well, I better behave in a slightly more safe sense.
I would say that
compares it to the blue shell in Mario Kart, which I can absolutely see that parallel. Whereas the blue shell is something that's given by the game, and this is something where it's just down to the players to see, this is my only chance at making up stuff, and I need to go for it.
Yeah, I think the difference between Totopoly as an old game and the newer games like Wits and Wagers and Camel Up is that Totopoly doesn't really address, in game design terms, those bluffing possibilities. So when it says betting, you just willy-nilly bet, and the person who's managing the bet just writes them down. There's no specific order in which you have to do this. So in a sense, although there is potentially missing information because you don't necessarily know what somebody else has bet, but if you wait, then people will bet. There's no design constraint on how you order the bets, which I think a modern game would introduce. So you definitely have, it's important who bets first and who bets last, and whether you can pass when you're betting, how many horses you bet on. Those kinds of things are just free and easy in Totopoly. Very, very free and easy. It's a bit like auctions in Monopoly. There's no prescribed method of auctioning in Monopoly. So it's a very similar style of game where it's assumed that players will work it out rather than dictating how you want to do it and making that part of the gameplay.
Just to make it clear, I mean, Camel Up is from 2014, Wits and Wagers from 2005, Magic the Gathering 1993, and Totopoly 1938.
Yeah.
And even Magic the Gathering, I think that for the first 6-7 years, it was very much on the ethos of players can work it out themselves. And it is a different sense. And there's a lot of things, specifically like auctions, where auctions can be fast and easy. I mean, Monopoly doesn't really explain how the auctions work. But you kind of say, okay, well, I guess we'll do it as an English auction, sort of, except that the auctioneer is quite often bidding themselves, which is slightly perverse.
And there is auctioning in Totopoly, as I said at the start of. And we're not talking about auctions particularly, but there is auctioning in the.
Yeah, we've already done that for
We've already done that. But again, I don't think there's a prescribed auction method.
But it's just
for it.
noting that when you bet, the exact manner of the order of when you bet. I mean, it's kind of like Wits and Wagers, frankly. Even though that's a relatively modern game, because it's a party game and it's designed as well, you can put down stuff in any order and we'll just leave the players to work out exactly what order you put stuff on the cards. And a lot of the versions just, it's a party game. Who cares?
Yes. Yeah.
And that's okay because the rules end up being like 2 pages of big text with lots of pictures, which you can read in less than a minute. If you read fast enough.
Well, Totopoly is more of a family.
Yeah, but like my point is that that vagarity, those vagarities of rules have continued with party games.
Yes, exactly.
But let's take a step back. Betting and bluffing. How does it impact a game? Actually, let me take my real question is: do you think this is correctly? Do you think this is a good name? Should it just be betting? Because I feel like the intention, maybe I should send a message to Jeff and Isaac, but I feel like the intention was for this to be primarily about the betting. And the things that are mentioned in the book aren't mentioned as examples of betting. For example, when it mentions the mind, that's to mention, hey, by the way, this is related to Yomi, which the mind has a lot of.
Yes.
And that's not saying that this is a game for this category, whereas people on board they just lump in everything.
I'm not very, even reading the commentary in the book in this particular case, I'm not clear because it talks a lot about games where it explicitly says are only about bluffing, not about betting, like Skull and Roses and Liar's Dice. And so why have we got betting and bluffing in the same category? It's because I think it boils down to betting. Am I right in saying betting invariably involves some form of bluffing? Because it is all about saying, I think that I've got superior knowledge than you, or I think I'm luckier than you. So there's some element of bluffing. Otherwise,
let's have a thought experiment. Let's say that, and I'm glad that you enjoyed your donut avec du lait, but I think that imagine bluffing done simultaneously, like a simultaneous auction. It's not an auction, but we are just saying which of these things do we think will win. It's a prediction. Is that a bet? I think it is. And if there's no interaction, if you don't get to see what I bet on, and if you don't get to see, or if the when is dictated, then I think that that's a bet without the bluffing.
Isn't that a blind auction?
No,
isn't
because
that just a blind auction?
No. Like if we imagine, like I'm not saying this is a good game by any means, but just imagine for like, okay, we've got the components of Camel Up. So we've got the components of Camel Up, and then we just spit the dice out. We keep taking the dice, and then once the first camel has crossed a certain threshold, we all write down. We don't use cards. We don't use anything else. We just use the dice and the camels, and we say, and we write down a note of which camel we think will win, and then that is a bet, is it not?
That is, yes, that's a bet, but it's a bit like a horse racing bet. But the horse racing bet is
bluffing.
Is there no button? Well, no, there isn't really, is there? I guess. Well, it's I don't know. Is it? What's the difference then between a bet in that sense and an auction? Because I suppose you're not buying any. Are you buying any? Well, you are buying.
No,
something,
you're not.
You're buying
the winnings. Auction is how many of
the
my resources am I willing to give up for something. That's what an auction is.
Yes, but what you're doing in the case in the example that you just gave is you're saying I'm betting this amount, and if I
No,
win
you're not
that,
betting an amount. You're
oh,
just
not, oh, just oh,
predicting
you,
what you think will win. You don't
oh,
get to write any number.
oh, but
You just
betting.
say, "This is what I think will win."
I'm not sure it's a bet then, because it's just a prediction. Betting specifically in the definition, you have to stake something. Betting has to involve a stake, otherwise it's not a bet, because there's no loss. Betting involves winning and losing. It has to, otherwise it's not a bet. And
I mean, I
if you're
guess there's the opportunity cost, but I could see,
yeah,
you saying that that's a prediction and that's separate from a bet. Are predictions, I mean, elemental
I don't know if we've got prediction. The other thing that's
predictive bid.
push your luck is an interesting adjunct to betting. I was wondering whether the bluffing thing was associated with push your luck, or at least, sorry, whether the betting was associated with push your luck quite closely, because in push your luck, which we won't come to until we get to the piece, players have to decide between settling for existing gains and risking them all for further rewards. So push your luck is very similar to betting. So I'm in a sense I'm betting. If I lose the bet, I lose my stuff. And in push your luck, if I stay in and I win, I get all the stuff. So in a sense, it's very similar to but in push your luck, I'm not necessarily doing it against somebody else, am I? The whole point of betting is I'm making a stake. If I win, I win all the stuff. Yes. So I win your stuff and my stuff if we're betting against each other. Push your luck, it's not the same. Push your luck is I have a stated amount of winnings, and if I keep going, if I push my luck and I fail, I lose my stake. So there is quite a key difference. What I'm quite interested in is
And
something
Alex
like
asks,
Skull.
is the idea of the category, is it meant to be more like Skull?
Well,
Or
they have included
where the betting is in aid of the bluffing?
Yeah, they have
And
included Skull as an example in the rubric, but I can't. I find it hard to think of Skull as involving betting. Although you do, if you lose, you do lose a tile, don't you? In Skull.
I mean, it says other games that are only about bluffing.
Yeah,
include
exactly.
Skull and Roses,
Yeah.
Liar's Dice, Cockroach Poker. So it's acknowledging that those games are not about betting. Although I guess you could argue that, well, I would say you could argue that Skull is a bet of whether these things will turn up. You could also argue that it's some sorts of turn order until pass auction.
You have to have a stake. The whole point of betting is you have to have a stake. You are staking something.
Does the stake have to be determined by the player? Like if we set at this point,
no, I don't think so. Because in Camel Up, the game decides what your stake is.
But you determine kind of whether to go for it or not. Like in a hypothetical, let's imagine the things go along, and then on the fourth movement, the game pauses and you make a bet. And if you're correct, then you win X points. If you're wrong, then you lose Y points. Then it carries on until turn 8, and then same thing, and then turn 12, same thing, and then carries on until the end of the game.
I think there has to be a relationship between the stake and the stakes, the pool of stakes, which you win, or at least you win a proportion of, and the amount you're betting. So you have to have a stake in it, otherwise it's not a bet.
Of course, but
also you have to have but no, you don't just win. You don't win something arbitrary. That feels more like it, not arbitrary. You don't necessarily win something which is just set by the game as a fixed thing, like a number of victory points. You win something based on how much everybody has staked.
And you have to be able to determine the size or magnitude of the winnings. Is that what you feel has to happen?
Yes, I think the amount that you win has to be based, I think, on... I'm beginning to waver a little bit because Camel Up doesn't necessarily have this. The amount that you win would normally be based on the amount that everybody collectively has staked. So if everybody bids only very small amounts in the stakes only very small amounts, you're only going to win a very small amount. You're just going to win. But if everybody stakes big, you're going to win a heck of a lot. Hence that Totopoly thing where if I bet on an outsider, I'm the only one, I win the whole pot because I've taken a risk. I'm more likely to fail completely, but lose relatively small amounts. But if I do win, I'll win massively big.
Alex asks, can you think of an example that isn't poker?
An example of
everyone contributing to a pot and then.
Well, Totopoly has that. Totopoly specifically has that. You bid on you. No, I keep saying bid. It's not. Is it a bid? You're staking some. I always think of bid as being associated with auctions, but it's stakes for betting because they are functionally. I think they're functionally different. So when you're staking when you're staking betting
I think the key
Totopoly,
difference is that, like with the auction, it's about being the most, and with the bets, it's like you're either correct or you're wrong, and so in a sense, your results are a bit more independent of the other players. I mean, in theory, 10 players could all be correct, and that's the way that a lot of games work. For example, Camel Up, everyone could be betting on the same thing.
Yes, but Camel Up has a way of breaking that so that people don't win the same amount in Camel Up. They never win the same amount in Camel Up.
Sure, but they could. I mean, let's go outside the. I don't mean in Camel Up. I mean in games. Like, let's go to outside of games and let's go back to betting in real life of horse racing.
Yeah.
Which I assume no one would say is not betting, and it is a form of game. Even though you are using real world money, it is clearly a bet, and everyone could go in there independently, bet exactly the same amount of money on exactly the same horse or whatever. And it's unlikely to happen.
No. There's the critical difference there is odds. Odds change the whole thing. You're not just betting against a random. The amount of money that you win when you bet on horse racing depends on how many people have bet on that horse, because that will change the odds. The people who are offering you the odds, bear in mind how many people have. So if you bet on a favourite, you might be betting and not winning. If the favourite's really likely to win,
is that
it's always related to how many.
It's going to happen sequentially, and the first person to bet will get better odds because those odds are being adjusted as time goes on.
Kind of ish, but I think that the key point is that the odds that you get on a bet are based on how the population of bettors has acted. So if you bet really early on a race, you might get really good odds if you bet really early, because nobody else has bet yet, and it might become a favorite, but you'll still get the odds that you were offered. So you might bet out 10-1, and it might go, by the time the race starts, the odds might have shortened to 5-4. So you bet really well because you bet early, but you took a risk because it might have been, the horse might not have run, or the horse.
But then betting in different locations simultaneously in the real world, when people are betting with actual money, many people could bet online all at once with exactly the same odds, or indeed in different branches of the same betting shop all at once.
Yes, absolutely.
And the betting shop hasn't had time to adjust their bets. And so I'm not sure that
to an extent
changing odds is a requirement. I don't feel like people do have to get different odds for a game to function.
No, not for a game. No, I'm thinking but using the horse racing example without odds doesn't cover the fact that the key point I was making was that it's the value of all the stakes together that make it a bet in some sense. In other words, as the definition says, it's you have a chance of winning everyone's stake. I think that's probably over the top a bit. You're certainly having a chance of winning based on the total stakes. that are around, and that's why horse racing odds is a critical thing, because you're trying to beat the odds, aren't you, in real life horse racing. Camel Up is a bit of a difficult one.
Yes, I mean,
because
this thing
it's
to purchase a chance of winning everyone's stake, that's a very specific thing, you're right. And that doesn't actually happen in the vast majority of games here. I
well,
mean,
it does
outside,
happen in Totopoly.
sure,
Totopoly's
but
horse racing, but
yeah, that's one example out of
Mm, mm.
2,606.
Well, we haven't looked at very many. We've only looked at 4 examples. So I mean,
Sure, but I know like these 6 games, and none of them match this description.
no, I think that is a weak part of the description. It's not necessarily I think there is a relationship between what you win and what everyone else did when they bet. So even in Camel Up there is. So if I bet early and I win, I earn more than somebody who also bet and won but bet later. So there is a relationship between my bet and what other people did, and I think that's quite critical.
I'm going to
Even
say
if we both
something.
win, yeah.
I feel like the auctions were very clearly defined. These are terms that have been around for decades, maybe even centuries. And I think that as we get into language that is being invented, I'm sure that Geoffrey Engelstein and Isaac Shalev would agree that this is not a be all and end all. This is not the last word on what mechanisms are, but this is the start of an exploration. And
Yes.
so I think we can agree that there is some vagary here, which does make our closing questions quite complicated.
I would
And
agree.
I would like to, after episode 1000, I'm not sure. This is actually turning me off slightly, considering this, and it's making me feel like, we've both read the book, Alex.
There isn't.
Go ahead and read it. But I was going to suggest that I would like to reach out and ask if there's potentially another time of day that's more US friendly, where we might be able to ask them to come on.
That's a good idea. That's a very good idea. I mean, I'm noticing. I think the problems we're having with this one is quite instructive, because if you look at auctions and how much they were divided up, and it's acknowledged auctions, some of the oldest mechanisms in games. This is also, and it says in the description, some of the oldest games in human memory are betting games, and yet what we've got here is one category, betting and bluffing, and we are coming to the conclusion for this particular one, it's not easy to use. The definition may not be quite as good as some of the other ones, and it's discussing betting and bluffing in the same item. So it seems that possibly this bit is a bit of a weaker section, and it will be good to get their views on this. I mean, I'm sure they'll have some comments to make.
Yes. At this point, I do want to go through our regular things. So, using a loose and permissive definition of betting and bluffing, accepting everything that's listed on Board Game Geek as having betting and bluffing in it, how do you think it affects the game, and how will it affect the experience at the table?
Well, I mean, like a lot of the auction ones, the major impact on the game is enforcing player interaction, or providing opportunities for player interaction. What we've said for all of these, pretty much. And it's a specific type of player interaction, because it involves reading the other players. Like in a lot of auctions, it's about reading other players. In the betting ones, it's a lot about reading other players. So people who are interested in those, people who want to do a kind of solid competitive solitaire puzzle type Euro game aren't necessarily going to want to do a betting game.
I think it's really interesting, because bluffing games quite often, like the Kakerlak and poker that's been mentioned, it's explicitly about lying. You have to
Yes.
lie sometimes in Kakerlak and poker, or you'll almost certainly lose.
Yes.
Because as soon as people realize, oh wait, this person's always telling the truth, you're done for.
Yes.
Whereas in a betting game, there's never any explicit lies. And I think that's a really interesting thing. So for someone who doesn't feel comfortable with lying or doesn't feel comfortable being lied to, it does offer a sense of misdirection.
Yes. It's psychological misdirection. It's like that being confident when you're making a play where you're not actually really confident about it, because you're trying to demonstrate to other players and overawe other players to an extent, and force them to make false moves. That's the kind of thing. Yeah.
And I mean, like when Timmy mentions like Among Us taking it into the video game thing, which is kind of like Werewolf, that is one where you've got to sort of, if someone says, oh, what are you doing? You say, oh yeah, I'm trying to fix this. And you do again, assuming that you're playing with voice, where that's how people used to play it the most, I think, having, you're playing it on the phone or laptop, but you've also got this voice thing going on. And I think it became really big because of the pandemic. People weren't able to get together. And it is a lovely game. I'm not going to deny that. I enjoy lying sometimes in games, but having the possibility to misdirect is, without lying, is actually part of the brilliance.
Yeah. So I think
Alex says in Kakerlak and Poker, I played with someone who drew their bugs blind. That was a short game.
Yeah, it's again, it's another form of another type of communication that you can make when you're playing a role in a game. And I think games do explore that a lot because, as we've acknowledged, games provide you a safe space to experiment with different aspects of how you like to interact with people, and that's the versatility of it, if you like.
Do you think that betting has to be a primary mechanism in a game? Do you think it is one of those things that will really radically change the atmosphere and has to be, built around?
Well, certainly the examples we've given, the ones we've selected, have been games where it's the central part. Betting and or bluffing is a central part of the mechanism.
For Goblin game in Magic the Gathering.
Oh yes, but we're a bit dubious about that now, and even that presents itself as a separate game. Just that one.
It's literally called Goblin game.
Yeah, literally. Yeah. So I think it seems. I mean, there are over 2,000, so we've only looked at half a dozen, maybe. So I think probably it does from the examples, the common examples that we've looked at. I think it really does have to be. It has to be the central part. Totopoly, the example I gave in Totopoly, where the original rules basically the betting didn't matter, which undermined the whole thing. Anyway, with Totopoly can't just be a game about winning the horse race. That makes no sense. Why have betting in there at all if all you're trying to do is win the race? So they had to change it and make it so that it was the getting the most money that wins. Otherwise, it just doesn't work. So yeah, I think it's unlike auctions, which some auctions you can have as simply methods of distributing resources. Betting isn't about that. Betting is about crunchy victory over your opponents, isn't it?
Yeah, I feel like you could have betting plus something else, and maybe that hasn't been explored as much as it could be.
Maybe I don't know.
Maybe that like we could have. I don't know. Is there a betting drawing game? I mean, I don't know. That might be something that I ponder for a bit.
But, okay,
maybe I'll make something in the next.
Yeah, maybe.
Weeks,
can you make something? Can you make one of those? What are you betting? If you're betting about something and it isn't the winning of the bet that decides the game, what's the point of the bet? If it's about,
it has to contribute to the victory.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is, it has to be, even though it has to be a primary mechanism, you can have like a fusion of two primary mechanisms in a game. Absolutely.
Well, you can. Well, I mean, even in Totopoly, you do have that thing where you can get money by being the owner of the winning horse. So you're not betting
kind of like
but
I know
that's very secondary. That's very secondary
to fall apart in some people's minds, because then if you're betting and have we used it in any games? I have not made any games about betting, but I am actually inspired to ponder it a bit now. I like the idea of betting.
I don't think I have either. No, I haven't. No.
Would you like to? Do you feel inspired to?
I may get a flash of inspiration from some point, and in which case I might well.
But you're not planning to ponder it.
I'm not planning to ponder it particularly. No, there's so much pondering of other things to go on.
Oh,
I do quite like
to ponder. I've
I do like betting.
finished
I
all
do
the
like
games
it.
for UK Games Expo.
I do like it. Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, there's yes.
With a
There's
whole
now and there's
2.5 weeks to go for
Two
them
and
to
a
get
half?
printed and delivered.
Yes.
They will be delivered to the hall. So,
Oh, I see. Okay.
when is it good, and who would enjoy it?
I think it's enjoyable by people who like reading other people and getting one over on them, I guess. A bit like some of our auctions. It's people who like that more direct interaction.
It's really interesting that we've gone from auctions. It's just happened to happen
alphabetically similar type of thing.
Betting, but it is definitely about that reading of other people. It's also about those big moments and that anticipation. It's about that excitement of will it pay off, will it not?
Yes.
And yeah, if people who like perfect information are going to hate this, there has to be an element of chance and a large amount of uncertainty for betting to even work. So I think that you have to be willing to forego those elements of a game for betting to be part of it.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree with that. Yeah. Because that's answering when it's bad. When it's bad, I mean, like the Totopoly example of the original rules where there was betting, but it didn't seem to make any difference to who won. That would be really bad. And I follow that up by saying I think if it's not a primary mechanism, then it loses its drama. If it's just a secondary thing, it loses its drama, and I would be hesitant about.
And this is an interesting question. So, how many primary mechanisms do you think you can really have?
Well, I mean, one. No, my instinct is to say one primary mechanism, but I may be wrong.
I mean, would you say that?
I don't know. It depends. It depends on how you define a mechanism.
It works really well, you can have, but they are both combining with each other. The quizzing and the betting are both symbiotic.
Yeah, you can have mechanisms. We define the mechanisms as separate mechanisms, but they're not actually, are they? In a lot of cases, they can be integrated into
and you could subdivide this even more. Yes, so let's there is no real atom, and even the atom in physics can be subdivided. I mean, it's not like the word atomic kind of loses the meaning because it's not the atomic principle. You can subdivide it even that.
But if you want to get philosophical about it, if you divide an atom, have you got things? I don't think you have, you see. I don't think they're things. I think they're a whole different...
Alex says, it's for people who like the manipulation of perceived value. You're not really manipulating it, though. And Alex says, reminds me that there was no plural to the word priority until the 20th century. Is that true?
Well, it's quite possible. I remember doing World War II stuff, talking about priorities. If you look at Bomber Command had a priority list, but their priority list was like 20 things. I mean, that's not a priority list. You can't have a priority list which is 20 things and then say, well, we're addressing all these 20 priorities. That's not prioritizing. That's just having a list of things you have to do. Yes.
That's a to-do list.
It's a to-do list, not a priority list. Yeah.
Yes. So it has to be up there as a primary mechanism, and we're not quite sure how many primary mechanisms you can really have. But I think definitely with these kinds of mechanisms as defined currently by Board Game Geek or by this book, I think that 2, maybe 3 is probably viable as primary mechanisms. But I think it has to be something that's meaningful. Otherwise, it loses its drama, as you said, Alan.
Yes. Yeah, I think so.
And the entire point of bluffing is to manipulate the opponent's perceived value of future
I like
bets.
that goes to the heart of kind of Camel Up. Sometimes you might want to make bets in Camel Up on the end of the race, knowing that you're not making things which are actually going to work, but you're just putting that question to other people's mind. Oh my God, if I don't bet on that camel, I might lose out. And then, yeah. So you can't.
Okay, let me wrap up and say, Alan, do you have a question for us? Question of the day. Question of the day. Here's a little question before we go on our way. Question of the day. Question of the day.
Yeah, you built that up really nicely, and I haven't thought of a question of the day really. Probably should have, shouldn't I?
Okay, let me ask.
Okay, no, I've got one. Okay, bearing in mind we're looking at old things. What is the oldest game in your game collection? That is my question of the day. I mean, my talk is going to be about then and now. So what's the oldest game in your collection? Mine is probably Tactics 2, which is one of the earliest Avalon Hill games. I can't remember when it came out. 1950s, I think. Formula One and Totopoly are quite old, and I do have a very old copy of Buccaneer as well. So if they're UK games, they tend to be very old family games.
Timmy says probably Wolfenstein 3D. I have it on a floppy disk.
Yes, okay.
And Alex says, I have a chess set, but the copy of the game is probably only 20 years old. I mean,
think
if
it has
we're
to be the
including
actual
copies
copy.
of things,
The copies.
then
I think it has to be a
for
real
me
one.
it's go. But in terms of the actual components being old,
yeah.
I do have an old thing of Contraband.
Oh right. Oh yes.
That I've still not played it. I would like to play it before I
used to like Contraband a lot, and I played it about a year or so ago. I thought this isn't actually very good. I thought it was a lot better than it was actually. But, never mind. That happens a lot. You should never revisit your old treasured memories of games in the past, because you suddenly find it doesn't really work.
What's your oldest game? Let us know. And over to you. What are you up to? You can share bots if you want to. I have my priorities are right now. I've got two urgent priorities, let's say. One of them is to get ready for tomorrow's 1000th stream.
Yes.
The other one is to get ready for someone who's going to be living with me for 2 weeks. So I'm going to get lots of stuff out of a room, basically just moving that stuff out. I think I could technically do that tomorrow night, but it feels like that might be pushing it a bit late. They're going to arrive at 11 p.m, so I'll have, there'll be time. The other priorities that I would like to do this week that I'm not willing to say what they, like I definitely have a lot of UK Games Expo stuff to still do. I've got to book stuff with the restaurant. They don't get back to me, and I need to email them and book the thing and see if I can get someone else to book it. Maybe they'll have better luck with their credit card because it's just not working for me. But also, I would like to take some time off. I would like to go out for at least, let's say I'd like to take at least 5 hours off. I know that's a while, but normally people only work until a while and then they have the evening off. So I'm going to go out and then have a break and then probably come back and do
all my time is time off now, Bez, because I'm retired, you see. So. But I know what you mean. I know what you mean. What I will be doing is I am trying to get the next version of the rules for War of the Three Sanchos ready for Paul Grogan to have, because he's doing a video for us on Friday. Dave Mortimer's coming over, and
would Paul Grogan also be doing a video of your other game that's been released at Spiel?
No, it's not really a Paul Grogan game, that one. But I mean, we will do. I think we will do a video. We will do a video.
It's a strategic game.
We've got some time. It's a strategic game. Yes. What else am I doing?
The back of the floppy disk for Wolfenstein 3D says 2 real graphics.
Maybe
that's kind of dated a bit now.
Yeah, that's may have done. The other thing, what am I doing today? I've got to make sure that my little my little piece for tomorrow's 1000th show is done.
Mm.
It's too short at the moment, which is really odd. But yeah, that's coming along. That's coming along quite well. And I've got to finish my quick introductory scenario of Inferno as well, because it's on the table. If I don't finish it, I'll have to pack it away anyway before Dave comes on Friday. So I know.
So this is such a big game that 2 days to finish it might not be enough.
Oh no, I'm only going to be spending a couple of hours probably tonight on it.
So Alex, I hope you enjoy playtesting. That sounds like lots of fun. I'm going to see if I can redo my. I'm actually quite proud of it. It's a semi-real-time action programming bag building game with combat going on in the middle.
Real time, yes.
Semi-real time. So there's a burst of real time, and then you resolve the stuff in like turn. So like, what was once no, it's not semi-bag building. It is bag building. So like, it's kind of you do your stuff and it's boom, done. And then so the action programming is in real time. Semi-bag building. There's only half a bag.
I mean,
that could be an idea for a game. Go for it.
Yeah, a friend of we were talking with a friend of mine a few years ago on having a semi-real-time jigsaw building game. That was an idea. So you're competitive jigsawing, which is a thing, and then at some point something triggers and you pause, and then it's not real time where you actually work out what happens in terms of resources and what have you. And that was quite nice. That was we haven't actually managed to explore that enough yet, but it's that might be the kind of game that maybe Gibson's might be interested in.
Oh yes, I hear that they make jigsaws.
I do hear that, yes.
So let us recap and wrap up before we finish up. We talked about recent highlights is that we've not been gambling, and we did kind of caution people that if you ever do go and gamble, if that's something that gives you pleasure, then fine, but make sure you know what's your limit. I mean, frankly, anything can be really bad. I mean, it's like eating. I mean, you need to know what's your limit. Like, if I let myself, eat a ridiculous amounts, like kilos of chocolate, literally.
Yeah.
It's kind of being mindful of, okay, this is the point where I need to stop. The fun might continue, and I'm still getting endorphins and everything, but genuinely be very cautious about your relationship to real world stuff. And we talked about the brilliant thing about games allowing you to do this in a safe environment, about predicting other things and being able to have that excitement of seeing whether it pays off. We talked about recently finishing off Kingmaker, playing through Inferno, finishing off a game about words that rhyme with terrible rules on a line. We talked about how betting allows you to sort of communicate asymmetric information and glean what information you might be able to do from other people, like in the classic poker example. We talked about how it's a skill of estimation and probabilities and reading others, but unlike a lot of games where you're reading others, you don't have to lie. We talked about how it is a little bit of a vague thing, and a lot of the games were not sure like exactly how they match. We talked about Magic the Gathering and Goblin games specifically, Camel Up, and the way that it builds in this tension of it's almost like a reverse push your luck where you want to bet early to get the bigger payoff. We talked about that, like of doing things differently depending on whether you're ahead or behind. We talked about seeding the things that you're betting on by maybe it's not. I mean, you have to be betting on something. So instead of betting on things moving around the board, maybe you're betting on answers that are given by other people. Or indeed, maybe you are just betting on things going around the board. But everything that we talked about, we also said, sometimes the rhyme is just silly fun, don't let perfection stop you getting it done. So with that, I want to say, share, spread the word. Thank you very much, everyone. Specifically, thank you, Alan, but also
It's a
thank
pleasure.
you, Alex and Timmy and Salty Horse and Joe Kelly and CD and everyone for chiming along. And thank you to all the lurkers as well. Timmy says, I don't gamble because I assume I'd lose. And I'd consider it a donation to the casino, and I don't want to donate to a casino.
Well put.
I like sometimes it's night. Would you consider a raffle a form of gambling, Alan? Actually,
it is a
like,
form of gambling, yes. I think it's gambling, but it's a kind of harmless gambling. But there are strict rules around raffles as well, so I think it's a fairly harmless form of gambling, isn't it?
I think it's different because it's easier to decide up front, this is how many tickets I want to buy, right?
And they're almost invariably community driven. So
yeah, because that was what I was going to say. Like,
you're not just on your own betting against random strangers. You're betting as you're not betting. You're gambling as a community for a specific cause, and that's
because it's not a bet. You're not kind of saying this is going to happen. You buy the things. But I just wanted to acknowledge the Here for Games community where they managed to raise, I think, £3,500 from. They had a mandatory donation from the Big Bring and Buy. You had to give 10% to charity, which is fine. Like, you use their venue and then you've sold some games, but you give 10%. Some people actually made larger donations, and the raffle was a case of, well, we've got all these games from publishers and people are excited to get them, and there was more money going in than the RRP of the items, which is obviously kind of what you want, because otherwise you feel like, well, is it worth me donating things to this cause? But then at the end, some people are happy, and it was clear towards the end of that raffle, as a person who was pulling out the tickets out of the bucket, plenty of people said, oh, I've already won a prize, just leave me out and let someone else win it. Because they put in maybe 50 quid because they wanted to give 50 quid to the cause, if that makes sense.
Indeed, yes, we have the same thing at our role-playing conventions. We have raffles like that, where lots of people buy raffle tickets, but some people buy a lot, and therefore they'll often just only take one prize or two prizes, which is good.
Thank you, everyone. I've been Stuff by Bez. You can see all my links at the bottom. Check me out. And I'm not going to bother showing that anymore because I am streaming tomorrow. And actually, you can go there, and that will also tell you the schedule for tomorrow, because there is an actual schedule, because everyone's got a specific 20 minutes. And I will set that up. And if you want to check out Alan, then you can check out Alan.
If you actually need to get in touch with me, best one is email, either alan@alanpaull.co.uk or alan@surprisetogames.co.uk. But I am also on Twitter as BenthamFish. I'm on Board Game Geek as Alan Paull, and I have a blog on my Surprise Day website. And I'm 12 o'clock tomorrow, I think.
But turn up for like the whole thing, if you, or like just kind of have it on in the background if you can, or chime along whenever you want. But lots of love to everyone out there, and for now, until tomorrow, bye 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 bye. This is a goodbye song. Blue bye 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye 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 bye. Now it's time to go. Bye 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 bye. This is a goodbye song. Bye 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody. See you tomorrow.